All right. Good morning, Colorado. This is the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. This is our first meeting in January of 2022. Welcome everyone to our meeting. Thank you for being with us. We will start with a roll call. Hearings Manager Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Bogue, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Here.
Commissioner Hackett.
Here.
Commissioner McGowan.
Here.
Commissioner Mesner.
Here.
Commissioner Nanjapa.
Here.
Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 6 out of 7 commissioners present.
Excellent. Well, again, good to see everybody. We are continuing our meetings via a virtual format. Welcome everyone to the first meeting. The first item on our agenda is commissioner comments. Do any commissioners have comments they would like to make for the good of the cause? Commissioner Hackett.
Thank you, Chair Robbins, and good morning, everyone. Just wanted to remind folks that on December 17th, the Air Commission approved a new set of rules that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the oil and gas sector by more than 4.8 million tons per year by 2030, further advancing the state's climate change goals. And folks tuning in and commissioners and staff might be interested in the presentation you will receive next week from the Air Pollution Control Division's Rob and Willie about these new rules. And I would encourage folks to tune into that or consider reviewing the recording if you're not available. So just wanted to share that, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Commissioner Hackett. And that's set for our regular meeting next on the 12th, is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Do you know what time by chance?
We are shooting for 10:25 to 11:25, but it, I think, depends on how many public commenters ultimately sign up.
Okay, excellent. Well, we will look forward to hearing from Ms. Wiley next week on that, and encourage everybody else to attend as well. Commissioner Nanjapa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a really brief update on the work of the Biological Resources Working Group. I gave an update at the end of December, but it was our evening hearing, so just for the benefit of those folks who may not have heard, the working group met 4 times, and we came up with a working definition in order to be able to identify data sources that might be appropriate for operators to consult in order to think about biological resources. However, the definition and the aspects of what operators would need to do would all be more formally addressed in a rulemaking at some point. We're in the process of writing up a recommendations document. Initially in the statement of basis and purpose for the 800, 900, and 1200 series, this was recommended to be done by January 15th. But it was not something that was set in rule as a deadline. And we do have other deadlines that are set in rule for January 15th. So in the December hearing, as you all recall, I noted, and I think everybody agreed that it was fine for us to kind of push this deadline a little bit. So we're in the process of writing up with the staff the recommendations that then the group will have a chance to take a look at. And then we'll have a brief presentation, I believe, next week on just some of the high-level recommendations that we're thinking about so far. But then the full document will be released sometime in the middle of February.
Excellent. Thank you for that leadership work on that front, Commissioner Nanjapa. Much appreciated. Other commissioners with comments? I had one. It's for all of our purposes. The commission, when it adopted its mission change rules last year, identified a January 15th date by which, no, a January 1 date, I believe, by which we would publish any potential rulemaking around high priority habitat updates to maps. And I'd like to call upon Ms. Larson, because the staff did make a filing in concert with the Administrative Procedures Act, and I believe we've got a meeting with stakeholders coming up. So, Ms. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you're correct. Our mission change rules require that the high priority habitat maps be noticed no later than January 15th of each year for a rulemaking update. And on December 31st, staff filed with the Secretary of State a notice of rulemaking to update those maps. CPW has provided the maps to us that are to be considered for updating in our rules, and the proposed maps and the statement of basis of purpose has been put out on our website and is available to the public there. We're also having a stakeholder meeting on January the 18th, which is, I believe, a Tuesday. And that meeting will be at 1 p.m. And staff, including CPW staff, will be available to answer questions from the public and to go over the proposed changes. And that rulemaking at this point has been noticed for hearing starting April 6th of this year.
Thank you for that. Do we have a staff contact on that matter if there are any questions? Just
Yeah, definitely. Greg Duranlo has been the point person working with CPW and here internally at COGCC on that rulemaking.
okay. So I see that Greg is with us. Thank you, Greg, for volunteering to be the staff contact on that front. We appreciate it. Very good. I'm not seeing further commissioner comments. We can move to general public comment. I do note for the record that we had 2 written comments submitted, one by Heidi Leithwood and one by Janice Brown. Appreciate that. Commissioners have reviewed that, and we note that getting written comment is helpful. Public comment, we had 1 person sign up. That is Mr. Wes Wilson. And Ms. Larson, I'm not seeing Mr. Wilson in the Zoom meeting. Do you see him?
I don't either. And if Mr. Wilson is in the meeting, if he could raise his hand and we'll bring him in.
All right, looking for hand raising measures. All right, I'm still seeing none. Are you?
Well, someone has raised their hand. Colorado Oil and Gas Association. If you like, I could bring them in and perhaps.
Sure, bring them in. Let's see what the hand raising is about.
Okay.
See that we have the Colorado Oil and Gas Association on the panel. They remain muted. I believe Mr. Wilson is not affiliated with them, so this is a little bit unique.
Perhaps they raise their hand in error. If they don't have anything to comment on, and we're assuming it's not Mr. Wilson, I will just move them back to being an attendee.
Okay, why don't we do that? I think we are aware that Mr. Wilson is not associated with COGA. So, okay, with that, what we'll do is we will keep public comment open, and if Mr. Wilson is able to be with us, we will call upon him when we see him. All right, with that, we will continue down our agenda. We now have the consent agenda. We have 7 hearing officer recommendations on pooling orders. Do any commissioners have any questions with regard to consent agenda? Seeing no questions, do we have a motion to approve consent agenda?
So moved.
We have a motion. And
Second.
we have a second. Motion from Commissioner Gonzalez, second from Commissioner Nanjapa. Any further question on consent agenda or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are through consent agenda. All right, now we will see on our agenda a quarterly update from KPK on its progress under the terms of the compliance plan entered in order number 1V 772, docket number 2011000261. And I believe that we've got KPK's council, Mr. Watsman, with us. Thank you, Ms. Larson, for bringing him to the panel. Let's see if we've got anybody else from KPK. Good morning, Mr. Watsman. You are muted.
Morning, how are you? We have several others that are jumping on.
Okay. Why don't you identify the others that you would like to have with us? Make sure we get everybody on board before we proceed.
John Jacobs, counsel from Davis Garrett Stubbs. We have Jeff Rickard, regulatory technician, KPK. Ray Gorka, he's our head of environmental compliance. And Jennifer Gallus, she is the primary contractor.
Okay, give us a second to raise them to the panel. And we're also bringing Ms. Stafford, our AAG from staff, and Mr. Axelson, one of our environmental managers from staff as well.
And Mr. Watsman, I don't see the rest of the KPK group in just yet, but I know we're running ahead of schedule, so we'll give them just a moment to get in the meeting.
Thank you.
I'm still not seeing the rest of the group in the meeting. Ms. Larson, why don't we take some affirmative action, and perhaps we could text Mr. Jacobs and see if we can get folks on board. And why don't we take like a 10-minute break and then reconvene at, like, I don't know, 9:25 or thereabouts, and that'll give everybody a chance to hop on.
Okay, we can do that.
Thank you. I just sent them an email as a reminder, but I know they were planning on jumping on at around 9:30. I know we're a little bit early, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
If that's the case, Mr. Watson, then let's just take a break to 9:30, and that'll give everybody a chance to get on board. With our limited public comment, we're running an hour and a half ahead of time, which is unfortunate. So, or fortunate. So we'll get back at 9:30. Everybody go freshen your coffee.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. It's 9:30. We had taken a short break to give the various parties on the KPK matter a chance to arrive. We had a non-existent public comment period, which upped everything else. I would note for the record now, though, that our one public commenter has appeared. And so I would like to go ahead and recognize our public commenter, give him 3 minutes, and then we will proceed with the KPK matter. KPK folks, just remain on the panel, just silence yourself if you don't mind. And then with that, Ms. Larson, do we have Mr. Wilson with us?
Well, I just asked Mr. Wilson to become a panelist and he declined. So I will try one more time. Mr. Wilson, if you wish to provide a public comment. Oh, okay. Now he's accepted.
Okay, great.
Yes, I'm here now.
Good morning, Mr. Wilson. We recognize you for your public comment.
Okay, I didn't know I was going to be so unique this morning. I just wanted to come on and tell you about some new information that will be coming to you at the end of the month on PFAS, that whole group of compounds that has been primarily used in firefighting foams, But we're now getting evidence. There's going to be a document come out from Physicians for Social Responsibility and Sierra Club jointly, demonstrating that PFAS is being used here in Colorado in the fracking fluids in some locations. It's similar to dioxin. You know, it's a carcinogen at very low concentration. I'm sure you're aware that EPA has been struggling with what type of drinking water guideline it's going to release on PFAS. It's currently at just 70 parts per trillion. And I bring this to your attention because it's going to be a factor in the upcoming financial assurance rulemaking with respect to the costs of closure. Because it's our opinion that upon when the well is out of service and now getting prepared for flooding and abandonment and reclamation, that all sites should be tested for PFAS, and determine if it's present and then handle that accordingly. Thank you. That's all I had this morning.
Wilson, as that information is developed, if you want to email us with a link, et cetera, we will look forward to reviewing that.
Yes, I'll do that. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, thank you very much.
And Chair Robbins, if I can just add, and Mr. Wilson, if you can make sure to include me on that email, CDPHE is very interested in seeing that as well.
Okay, Sean, I'll send it to CDPHE. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's going to be likely your responsibility to come up with those procedures. That's our anticipation.
Okay. All right, very good. So now we have accomplished public comment. We now will move to the agenda matter regarding an update from KPK under its progress under the terms of the compliance plan. I believe, Mr. Jacobs, you are unmuted, so I will call upon you to set the stage for us if you desire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy New Year to you and the commissioners, Director Murphy, John Jacobs with Davis, Graham and Stubbs for KP Kaufman Company, Inc. With me this morning for this first quarterly update under the compliance plan agreement are Ross Watsman, General Counsel of KPK, Jeff Ricard, Regulatory Technician for KPK, Ray Gorka, Director of Environmental Compliance, and Ms. Jennifer Gallus, Senior Project Manager and Colorado Regional Manager of the Marcom Fort Collins office. Ms. Gallus is the lead for our primary contractor under the compliance plan agreement. I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Gallus. She submitted KPK's written quarterly report via e-forms this morning and also emailed a copy to Hearings Manager Larson. She has a PowerPoint, some slides to use while summarizing that report for her verbal presentation this morning. So take it away, Ms. Gallus.
Thank you. I'm Jennifer Gallus. I'm with Marcom, and as John said, that I am with the primary contractor. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you guys can see my slides. Okay, so the compliance plan agreement was put together in November, and it had a number of things identified in there that KPK needed to comply with. The first was identifying a primary contractor, which has been identified as Marcom. And then COGCC approved of that proposal on November 29th. They were to complete a dedicated project account. This was set up on December 6th. They were to submit a global remediation implementation plan, or GRIP. Marcom submitted that on December 31st, along with the comprehensive waste management plan. The spill release reporting and training plan was submitted a week prior on December 23rd. Another submittal is to put together a flow line system integrity evaluation plan. That is not due until April, and that is currently underway. There were 4 NOAV sites identified within the compliance plan agreement. So I wanted to provide an update within those sites. The UPRR Pan Am That's remediation number 16131. The compliance plan agreement wanted a supplemental form submitted, supplemental form 27, which was submitted on 12/13. And it met those requirements that were outlined in that CPA to include an updated excavation extent, information regarding 5 monitoring wells and 2 soil borings that were installed on the site, groundwater analytical results from those wells, as well as a groundwater monitoring report were submitted. Updated maps, boring logs, and construction diagrams were all attached to that Form 27. The soil spread field remediation number 15951 has a supplemental Form 27, which is due this week on the 8th. That will be provided by the end of this week. Additional background analytical results and data analysis will be provided in that supplemental form, and additional plans if necessary, depending on those results as far as remediation or if we're going to be addressing anything in a reclamation plan. NESU consolidated remediation number 15797 has a supplemental Form 27 due by January 26th. The compliance plan agreement outlined that there are 2 COAs that need to be complied with, and those include having soil sample results in accordance with Table 915.1, and to conduct sampling and analysis of the excavation and related background samples by January 26th, and those will be provided. Grant tank battery remediation number 12158 shows that the compliance plan agreement wants to submit site maps showing previously installed soil borings, monitoring wells including elevations, soil sample locations and depths, surveyed limits of the excavation, and GPS data to verify compliance with Rule 216. Apex is another consultant working with KPK, and they did oversee all of the drilling activities on this project. Marcom is working with Apex and KPK to gather all of this information to submit with the supplemental Form 27. There's a number of sites that have been ongoing for the past few months. So the next couple of slides are just to provide an update on any technical work that has been provided or performed rather. The cyber site remediation number 19616, there is excavation ongoing at this particular location. There's a domestic well on the site, and that well is sampled every other week. I have been in touch with the property owner as well on that site. He reached out to me, or sorry, I reached out to him to introduce myself, and he responded asking about the sampling results, and I provided them to him. The Eugene Doversberger number 2 remediation 12783. There was a site visit conducted with Apex, Marcom, and KPK, and we gathered the GPS data that was required for the monitoring wells, and there was a map that was created for this project. The John Wiggins site, remediation number 18596. This is sort of a unique site as COGCC collected some samples in July of last year. 2 of those samples were above Table 915 regulations. There was further excavation done, and Marcom performed some field screening and oversight of that excavation in those 2 areas of exceedance. And then Marcom put together a proposed sampling plan to sample the newly excavated areas. There was a COA provided to us in the Form 27 that stated that COGCC wanted us to sample the entire excavation. I wanted to sort of bring this up today just because we want to be able to proceed with the proposed sampling plan to only sample the newly excavated areas as COGCC has collected samples in the remainder of the excavation, which have come back with results below regulatory values. So that is a sort of a unique update for today. The Lawrence Totem site remediation number 15811, there is currently excavation ongoing. There are soil samples that are above Table 915.1 values. but we need to collect some background samples to compare and reevaluate to see if we need additional excavation there. The Martin J. Schaefer number 2 remediation number 19938. We currently have the COGCC approval for backfilling the excavation as we reached delineation of that area. We are currently working on getting a reclamation plan together for that site. There was a recent extension of that deadline for that reclamation plan to February 1st. The associated Form 19 with this project has been closed out as we're operating under, a Form 27. Once the excavation is backfilled at this project, then we do have an approved plan for installing monitoring wells and opening a groundwater investigation. Morgan A1, which is a spill release ID 481051. There were soil samples collected on the 9th of December with results above table 915.1. Again, we need to collect some background samples for comparison here as those organics were below regulatory values, but some of the metals were in exceedance. So we want to collect some backgrounds there. Tier number 2, remediation 19278. There was another monitoring well installed, MW5, and then there were 2 soil borings, B1 and B2. We're currently waiting on analytical results from those activities, and then they will be evaluated. There are 2 sites, the Spade 112 remediation 19556 and the Tabor remediation number 19376. Both of these sites have obtained NFA status, so they are now complete. The UPRR 42 Pan Am I-5 spill release ID 480994. There's been excavation at that site and soil sampling. This is another site where the organics, the laboratory results have come back under the table 915 cleanup values, but we need to collect some additional background samples because the metals are above those values, and we need to establish background for the site. I believe that is it. Do we have any particular questions about any of the work that has been performed?
I'm looking to my fellow commissioners for questions. I also will be calling upon staff to provide their perspective on what is being accomplished, because staff are our subject matter experts. So, Mr. Jacobs, did you have anything further at this point with regard to updates?
Just to point out that the GRIP was submitted as Ms. Gallus indicated on the 31st. Staff is undertaking its review and comment on that. We're expecting that back on or before the 14th. And then we're to incorporate staff comment in the GRIP. And of course, the GRIP applies to many additional sites listed in attachment A to the compliance plan agreement, as you know. That's all I would further add to Ms. Gallus' remarks.
Okay. Very good. Do commissioners have questions before we call upon staff for sort of a perspective from their end? Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've just got a general question. As I acknowledge that there was, or has been indicated that the GRIP has been submitted, the comprehensive waste management plan has been submitted, the spill release reporting and training plan, and the written report, I think, was just emailed to us this morning, so certainly haven't had an opportunity to review that at this point. Where, and is it possible for me to actually see the other reports so that I can perhaps better understand what's in them, which would inform any potential questions, as I don't think at this point I've seen any of this information or don't know how to access it.
As far as the GRIP and the spill release and the waste management, is that what you were referring to, those reports?
That's correct. And I know that they may be in staff's hands, so it may not be a question for you, but just a general question, because I don't have any of this information to look at in order to inform any potential questions.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Go ahead.
Per the the compliance plan agreement, these are submitted by the primary contractor, Marcom, through the eForms system to staff. As a courtesy, we'd be happy to provide those to the chairman or the commissioners or the hearings manager going forward. But we're simply doing what the compliance plan agreement requires in the way of submissions, Mr. Chairman.
That's fine. And I think it's probably easier for commissioners to just, go to staff as long as Mr. Jacobs, as long as you realize that we're trying to be cognizant of not having ex parte contacts and things of that sort. But if
Sure.
you're good with that, that way we don't have to make another layer of submittals by you. We'll just make our request to Ms. Larson. Ms. Larson can touch base with Ms. Stafford and then get whatever it is that we're looking for.
That's fine with me, subject to my client, Mr. Wattsman's concurrence, but I don't see a problem with that.
Commissioner Messner, is that satisfactory?
Yeah, that's just fine. That's fine. I'm just wondering how to access the information in order to be able to review it, in order to be able to understand and ask questions. So
Awesome. Okay.
Yes, in response to that, we followed the request of staff to submit that directly to John Axelson and Greg Delanro. So those would probably be the best staff members to reach out to.
Okay. Very good. I see that Ms. Stafford, I'm sorry, Commissioner McGowan has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think this is for KP Kaufman staff. And I'm just curious to know how they see the work as progressing and how closely they're working with the contractor, because I think part of the conversation between the commissioners was a feeling that there was kind of a lack of maybe training and understanding what our staff was looking for in these conditions or corrective actions. And so I just like the perspective of KP Kaufman and how they're working with the contractor and how I know the training plan has been put together, but just kind of an assessment and a check-in on kind of that angle.
Mr. Gorka or Mr. Ricard, if you could respond to that for KPK, I think that would be appropriate.
This is Ray Gorka. We're working with Marcom and working with the commissioners. I think the progress that we're making shows how well everything is progressing along. We are closing some sites and we're just progressing along as the weather and conditions allow.
And I know, Jeff, you're working closely with Ms. Gallus at Marcom in your offices almost daily, if not daily. Do you want to add to that? You're muted.
Rickard, you're muted.
There you
There,
go.
I'm on mute now. I apologize. Yes, I am working with our primary contractor daily. We're sharing data via a SharePoint site, prioritizing our sites and working with all our resources. And as Rick Work has said, weather contingent and getting as much done as we can, as fast as we can.
Thanks. Hopefully that addresses your question, Commissioner McGowan.
Thanks. I'm glad to see that folks are working together. I'm hoping like this kind of cross-pollination will lead to some improvements over at KP Kaufman. So thanks.
Hey, thank you for that and for the answers there. I would now call upon Ms. Stafford and or staff to weigh in on the report that we've received. Any thoughts, questions, concerns? How are things going? Just sort of give us your update.
Thank you, Chair Robbins. I'm going to be speaking on behalf of staff, and also I will call upon Mr. Axelson to provide some additional detail on some of the points that I'll be delivering. So just to briefly start, I think staff generally agrees that there has been some improvement here with respect to the projects that are subject to the compliance plan. Just sort of as a background and as Ms. Gals delivered at the beginning of her presentation, The compliance plan was approved on November 5th. Staff worked with KPK to coordinate technical work at sites while the primary contractor was being finalized. And on November 24th, KPK notified the chair and the parties of the primary contractor selection, which, as you all know now, is Marcom LLC. Staff is satisfied with the selection and confirmed approval of the contractor. I will say, to be very transparent, we were a little surprised as we were under the impression as the compliance plan negotiations progressed that KPK was retaining and already working with a different contractor. Just thinking about it from staff's perspective with upcoming plan deliverables and, the 3 plans that were at least due in draft form by the end of the year, it would seem Marcom was put in a bit of a difficult spot here, having to sort of perform some very critical tasks on a shortened timeline, at least from staff's perspective. But I will say that staff had a very productive meeting on December 7th with KPK and Marcom. Staff initiated an introductory meeting in order to sort of discuss lines of communication and to set forth staff's expectations, sort of what they were looking for, from the plan submittals, as well as the work being performed at the sites. As I've mentioned already, we are early in this process envisioned by the compliance plan. And as we're all aware, the projects subject to this plan are spills and releases and remediations, which implicate environmental, health, safety, and welfare issues related to groundwater, soils impacted by oil or waste, et cetera. So generally, as I said, staff has seen improvements with the Form 27 submittals for sites and projects that are being managed by Marcom under the terms of the plan. Staff is currently building a working relationship with Marcom, and staff understands that there is a lot on their plate, and they've had to gear up with a lot of resources to tackle all of these sites and ensure that KPK is, performing the work envisioned by the compliance plan. Just to provide sort of an example of some of the working relationship that staff is building with Marcom. Staff has been on site occasionally to witness field sampling. I shouldn't say occasionally, excuse me. They've been on site to witness field sampling. And one of those instances was in the beginning of December. Marcom personnel oversaw that technical work, engaged with staff, was very forthcoming with providing sampling information, and they had a very productive discussion about the activities occurring that day. Staff has also had constructive discussions with Marcom personnel, handling of KPK's reporting. There are certainly growing pains to this process, but staff feels that things are improving. And as Ms. Gals pointed to during her presentation, there has been progress made at sites. I'd like to focus just a little bit on the deliverables under the compliance plan, and the deliverables in this case being the plans that KPK was required to submit by the end of, I guess, last year now. To set the stage throughout the enforcement hearing, the compliance plan negotiations and communications with KPK, staff has continually stressed the importance of the plans being thorough, understandable, approachable, and most importantly, functional. And as I mentioned, these plans were due to staff to provide comment on by December 31st, 2021. This would provide for staff comments to be able to be incorporated into the final versions of those plans. And those are the waste management plan, the GRIP, and the spill release reporting training plan. Sorry, some of that is a little bit of a mouthful. So those plans are currently being reviewed by staff, and we have had the opportunity to engage in a brief review over the few days that we've had them. I will say, upon initial review, staff is very concerned that the plans don't seem to address key necessary elements and may not ultimately lead to KPK's full compliance with the intent of the compliance plan or this commission's rules. And I'd like to turn it over to John Axelson now to provide you with some more specific examples of what staff has seen in the plan and sort of staff's overall impressions thus far. So Mr. Axelson, if you're ready, please feel free to jump in.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Stafford. Appreciate it. Good morning, commissioners. I did want to follow up on a couple points that Ms. Stafford made is our impressions of Marcom, specifically the management by Ms. Gallus, are very good. I think our staff is opening lines of communication with her. And then just moving into our preliminary technical review of the 3 plans, I wanted to start off with the waste management plan. So the compliance plan agreement specifically stated that the waste management plan will detail how KPK will treat, characterize, manage, store, dispose, and transport all types of waste generated from its operations. And I want to be clear, that didn't limit it to just E&P waste. It was all waste generated from their operations. KPK was basically gifted a $200,000 suspension of penalty for this plan to simply develop a comprehensive waste management plan that should have already been in place because it's already required by Rule 905A4. We felt this plan was extremely important based on the serious E&P waste violations demonstrated in the hearing, specifically with the transport of large volumes of oily waste to an unpermitted, unauthorized disposal area. Unfortunately, the plan submitted in the draft form is inadequate. KPK only identified 3 waste streams that their entire company generates. These included produced water, workover fluids, and investigation-derived waste. They included petroleum contaminated soil, which under COGCC rules is defined as oily waste, as a subcategory to investigation-derived waste. There's still clearly not an understanding of some of our basic rules. In the plan, they regurgitated some of the basic 900 series rules, but they didn't provide the planned management for other wastes that they generate, such as tank bottoms or pigging waste, what they're going to do with free product when they spill it, specific types of solid and hazardous waste that they generate. The plan should include every waste that they generate. We want to know how they're handling and disposing of things like tank bottoms. What are they doing with oil saturated booms and absorbent pads from spill cleanups? How are they handling old junk flow lines they remove? And are they testing them for T-norm? These are just a few examples. They did submit the plan, but it doesn't meet the basic requirements. So I'm going to move on to the GRIP now. I think based on staff review, we felt like this draft also falls pretty short of the requirements. In my opinion, it basically presented a plan to complete the GRIP. It didn't really provide the GRIP. So they did provide prioritization of categories for the sites of low, medium, or high, but they didn't really provide the priority that the work would proceed and be completed at each site. They provide general timelines, but no specific scheduling to complete works at the sites as required by the GRIP. And they did provide some Gantt charts, but the start dates in those were concerning. Site investigation dates for projects aren't planned to begin until May. There were no notes or current work being done, even though, as Ms. Gallus pointed out, they are performing quite a bit of work in the field right now. So those updates weren't included in the GRIP. We want to see that granular detail of what's the current status of each site on the attachment A list. Where are they at? What are the next steps? And when is it going to be done? Another deadline concern, remediation for sites not started isn't scheduled to begin until October, if I understood the Gantt chart correctly. This isn't the level of detail we expected in the plan. and it doesn't seem to present the level of effort needed to achieve the field work that needs to be done in a timely manner. So the 4 NOAV sites that Ms. Gallus discussed, those were listed in the compliance plan agreement. They kind of presented a mini GRIP, if you will, for each of those sites. And we didn't even get that level of detail in this overall GRIP. So I think I want to end on a better note. The spill release reporting and training plan, I think, was a good effort. There's still some considerable revisions that we're going to suggest and a couple corrections. But they're on track with that one. One of the things I do want to note, there have been 5 new spills recorded since the compliance plan agreement was finalized. We're still seeing reporting violations, errors in the reports, incomplete reports. And these new spills, you know, they're still being submitted by KPK staff because they're not subject to the compliance plan. We're also still seeing, you know, operational things, including as simple as installing adequate fencing around open excavations and maintaining that fencing. So we still need to see improvement with these kind of things. The reporting violations for spills are similar to the things that we went to enforcement for in the past. They really need to be corrected. So those are my comments. I'll turn it back to Ms. Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Axelson. I just wanted to stop briefly to see if commissioners have any questions. Staff does have a couple of additional things to say, but I know that you know, this is a sort of a very different maybe perspective than you were anticipating. So I did want to pause and see if anybody has anything to ask.
Thank you, Ms. Stafford. So Ms. Stafford, noting that the plans were just submitted within the last few days and we've had holidays in between, et cetera, I would anticipate that you and staff are, you know, just now getting a chance to review plans and understand that this initial review has provided some perspective that there needs to be some edits or some additions, et cetera. Have you had the opportunity to have sort of that cross-pollination, as Commissioner McGowan mentioned, in terms of meeting with KPK or their contractor and having discussions with them about potential needs for edits, et cetera, at this point?
Thank you, Chair.
Let me just sort of preface that this update kind of was scheduled on its own outside of that other component of talking with each other.
Thank you, Chair Robbins. You know, if you'll note, so all 3 of these plans came in basically over the holiday weekend. So staff has really had only the last few days to, you know, take a first blush sort of attempt at determining where there is room for improvement, what edits need to be made. But, you know, based on this first review, staff is feeling that it's definitely more than just edits that we will need to sort of communicate to KPK going forward. And to answer your question about whether that discussion has happened with KPK just yet, no, it has not. You know, staff has spent the past 2-3 days diving through these plans to ensure that they had a good understanding of what was in the plan so that they could provide you know, our response to you today and to be transparent about what we were seeing.
I would note, if I recall, that with regard to plan submission, that they are not deemed complete until approved by staff and myself as chair. So I'm not trying to obfuscate the point for staff to be able to talk to us today. I'm just trying to note that I think we need to have some staff, chair, KPK talking about that so that we can see if they can cross the finish line with regard to the plans. So anyway, those are my sort of comments. I don't know if they're questions. Do other commissioners have questions before we hear further from staff? I know Commissioner McGowan had raised her hand. Perhaps her question was already answered. Okay. Anything further than from staff or Commissioner Hackett and Commissioner Najapa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a question, just at some point, I do have a real brief update from the Air Pollution Control Division's consent compliance agreement with KPK. So at the appropriate time, if you just want to kick that off to me, I'm happy to provide that update as well.
Okay, let me back pocket that for just a bit. Let's get through the remaining portion of this and then I'll call upon you. Commissioner Najapa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Less of a question, more of a comment. I just am just wanting to note that the compliance issues, and especially hearing that there's some new matters that we're addressing now, and that concerns are being repeated. This is something that was a major concern for me during the hearings, and just I'm very interested now in looking at the spill report, spill and release reporting and training plan. I think KPK needs to take a hard look at their compliance efforts, compliance department, compliance staff, and really think about what and how they're doing things, because this is another red flag for me. That's all.
Great. I think that was probably heard. Commissioner or AG Stafford or Mr. Axelson, anything further?
I do have a few additional comments to make just to wrap things up on staff's behalf. I think we also had some additional information to share related to a piece of the compliance plan related to financial assurance update. I believe that was in the last section of the compliance plan. But briefly before I get to that, some sort of concluding remarks based on the plan.
Why don't we do this? Go ahead and provide whatever concluding remarks you have with regard to the compliance plan, not the financial assurance. And then I'd like to call upon KPK to give them a chance to sort of speak to us as well. This is a work in progress. We've never done this. We're all working together to try to move this forward. So go ahead, Ms. Stafford.
Thank you. So to circle up on, I have an example, I guess, just related to the spill release reporting and training plan. If you'll recall staff's presentation to the commission during the hearing, this necessity for KPK to build trust and confidence with staff. As we mentioned, staff is receiving adequate information on projects managed by Marcom. There are some concerns that remain, and thinking about the spill release reporting and training plan, it's staff's perspective here that we would anticipate that an operator would implement the principles of the plan, and that its application wouldn't be limited necessarily to the sites and projects contained in the compliance plan. The purpose of the spill release and reporting plan was to implement training protocols going forward for spill release reporting. And as Mr. Axelson mentioned in his remarks, it does not seem to be the case that that the intent of that plan is being followed. On the reporting that staff has received recently from KPK, there are deadlines that have been missed, incomplete Form 19s and Form 27s that don't contain required information. It's unclear if proper notifications have been made to local government designees. So we're, excuse me, staff is seeing some of the same issues that had been cropping up in the past that led to the enforcement matter. So I did just want to briefly touch on that, just to say that this issue seems to still be an issue even with the advent of the compliance plan and the submittal of the draft spill release reporting training plan, which I would note in KPK's cover letter, they said they were beginning to train their professionals on. So if that just, is a bit of a concern for staff here. With respect to some of the other, sorry, I just lost my train of thought there. Thanks for bearing with me. I just wanted to say that in conclusion, staff is, we've made the point time and again that we want KPK to achieve full compliance with the Act and the Commission's rules, and staff wants to see spills cleaned up, remediation projects completed, and that is the point of this compliance plan, to give KPK its opportunity to achieve full compliance. And I mentioned at the beginning of my introductory remarks here that staff has seen improvement. Staff understands Marcom has a lot on its plate with respect to keeping these projects on track, and potentially having to reevaluate prior technical work. But staff doesn't want to allow these issues to fester and to reach the point they did early last year, which necessitated the director's order and the enforcement process. So we understand that the KPK is making progress. This is all a work in progress. But based on some of the threatened and actual impacts to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources, staff feels it's very important to be transparent with you and to daylight these issues early so that they don't snowball into something that we can't control later on. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Stafford. And I think that, the way that this got set up, and I sort of remind all parties that this is a new approach with a new commission in terms of establishing this compliance plan and setting aside some penalties and seeing if we could get to a better operator that's in compliance. I think there was like a May deadline within which the commission would be reviewing sort of the sum total of KPK's work. It gave them 6 months or thereabouts to prove up, that they could, be the operator that we expect them to be. And so I appreciate the update from staff. I think that the information is good information for KPK to receive. I encourage the continued work together. I also want to note that Marcom's only been on board for a short period of time. Recognize that there is a hefty amount of work that needs to be done. So I don't know, those are my comments just as chair in terms of hearing from us. This is our first update. I would like to call upon Mr. Jacobs and or his clients if they would like to provide any additional perspective to us on this update this morning. And then we'll go back to Ms. Stafford for the financial assurance and then Mr. Hackett as well. Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to respond very briefly. Just want to clarify that one of those plans, I believe it was the spill release reporting and training plan, was submitted on the 23rd of December, a week earlier than required by the compliance plan agreement. Staff has had that a bit longer. I will just say, and confirm that this is the first we're hearing of staff's concerns with these plans. And it is constructive, and we thank you for the constructive criticism. We take it very seriously. It is a bit unfair to say you're being transparent with the commission when we're hearing this stuff for the first time. So it unfortunately deprived us of the ability to put our best foot forward today. We're working hard with Marcom and want to be that operator you expect us to be in full compliance with your rules and the compliance plan agreement. So we take all the comment very seriously. I've taken copious notes. I'm sure Ms. Gallus and Mr. Ricard have as well. We will improve upon this initial effort. And I ask that you bear that in mind, even as we hear your heartfelt concerns as commissioners. And I know that those concerns were raised during the hearing as well. So let us take this feedback and do better. And we'll look forward to another quarterly update as we get this first one under our belt, even while the GRIP and these plans are subject to staff comment not yet received other than verbally today.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. I also sort of reiterate that we've kind of had a collision of holidays and filings at the end of the year, and then this update that was previously scheduled. And so we look forward to the continued work. I appreciate that you've taken great notes. I anticipate you'll be hearing from staff privately. You can loop me in as chair for that review as well at the appropriate time. So with that, I'm going to look to my fellow commissioners for questions on this component of the update, and then we'll move to the other two. Commissioner Messner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some initial questions before a comment, I think, or a request, but so these plans were due December 31st. Plans have been submitted. If I remember correctly, and I'm not looking at the compliance plan, but I believe there's a 14-day window for staff review, and then it goes back to KPK for additional comments, and then some conclusion at the end of January. Is that correct?
Stafford, Mr. Jacobs.
Commissioner Mesner, that is correct for the GRIP specifically.
Okay.
I concur. February 1, the GRIP is to be adhered to in final form going forward.
So in light of that, as one commissioner, I'm very interested in understanding staff's comments and concerns with the particular drafts and getting information on that, and then having a staff update towards the end of the month to determine whether there has been some conclusion, not only on the GRIP, but the other plans, in order to better inform me as where we are at and what steps may need to be taken or not taken to determine compliance with KPK's compliance plan. What I'm hearing today is incredibly disturbing to this commissioner and frustrating. And so would like additional information and additional updates this month, not waiting until the end of this quarter. So.
Okay, so you've heard from Commissioner Messner. I feel that we'll probably be hearing from both sides. Hope to have successful hearing from these sides as well. Any further questions from commissioners on this aspect? Okay, seeing none, or actually I see one, Commissioner McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm not quite sure. I feel like that was either a request or from Commissioner Messner. And so I don't know when, if we want to address that, but I think I would be in agreement. I'm not sure I want to wait till the next quarter to see if we're on track. I think the whole point of this was to say to KPK, we want you to step up to the plate. We want you to show us that you know how to do this. And I realize that a contractor has been hired to help make this happen, but this has to happen. This has to happen in like a teach a man how to fish kind of way. Sorry, I don't know if that's an appropriate analogy for me to make, but this is all supposed to be like, is KPK stepping up to the plate and changing the way that they are interfacing with our staff and coming into compliance. So I would be supportive of Commissioner Messner's request and some sort of an update sooner than the next quarter so that we know after they've had a chance to talk back and forth about the plans and improvements to the plans that we're back on the right track.
Okay, we had two suggestions along those lines. I think I would ask Mr. Jacobs if he and his client are comfortable in some form of a report back after February 1st. I think really what it's to say is, did you guys all get into agreement with each other along those lines?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, if you're directing that to me, I think that would be fine. I think that as we get staff's comments, work through them, perhaps meet with staff, possibly even with you as chairman, to resolve any differences we have with respect to those comments and finalization of the plans. An update for the full commission after February 1st would be fine. I would caution that we don't want to change what was agreed to as a quarterly update into a monthly update, but given the significance of those plans and the concerns of the commissioners, I think that one update following February 1 would be fine.
Okay. Then, I guess I'm cognizant on treading through this issue without changing the terms that were agreed to.
Right.
I do believe that the commission asking for just another update is not substantively changing terms. And I agree with you, Mr. Jacobs, that these initial plans are sort of vitally important. So why don't we go along the lines of what you suggested or what you've agreed to? I think it's in concert with what was requested by Commissioners McGowan and Commissioner Messner. I'm sure the other commissioners are going to be happy to listen in as well, as will I. I will make myself available. I believe that the plan did dictate that I would be available if we, are coming to odds. So let's just move down these paths as best we can, and commissioners will make sure that we get an update with regard to these initial plans and where things are at sometime in early February. That thumbs up, everybody? I'm looking at my commissioners mostly. Okay, good. Okay, Ms. Stafford, you owed us an update on the financial assurance aspect, I believe. So we'd turn to you for that.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Chair Robbins. Just pulling up the compliance plan so that I can cite to the correct place. Section 7, paragraph 7 required staff to review KPK's financial assurance and assess the adequacy of such financial assurance and provide an update, a timely update. So generally, based on staff's review, KPK is in compliance with the plugging financial assurance requirements under current rules and with the Broad Act requirement of financial assurance under Rule 702. As with any operator, there is a concern about, upcoming and potential liabilities related to additional spills or releases, remediation projects, things of that like. As we all know, there are several outstanding remediation projects, and staff has a rough estimate of potential additional financial assurance that could become necessary for those ongoing remediation projects. And I will say this is a rough estimate, so we would have to engage in some additional specific and tailored analysis to fully evaluate here. But we've come up with a number of $2.25 million. And generally that estimate's based on thinking about, the 60 open projects and sites, thinking potentially there would be a necessity for potential additional financial assurance where only soils are impacted that need to be remediated, or on other sites where soil and groundwater might potentially be impacted. That would obviously increase, any potential additional financial assurance. Staff wants to stress that this is a conservative estimate, and it likely wouldn't cover the full cost of remediation on all locations, but it does take into account surface reclamation for the most part, and it would provide considerable coverage in the event KPK isn't able to finish any of their open projects. As I mentioned, for a more, sort of specific and tailored analysis, staff would need some additional time to really dig into the complexities of each project and closely review the plan and required work to give you a sort of a better sense of what might additionally be necessary. I do also want to stress that this is an update as required by the plan. At this time, staff hasn't filed an application under Rule 702 to petition the commission for an increase of financial assurance. We're simply, complying with your request to deliver the information that we have on hand and provide you with a potential estimate if you, at least sort of staff's conservative estimate of what might be necessary going forward. And that concludes my update on the financial assurance portion.
Thank you, Ms. Stafford. So at this point, again, we asked for an update today, but it sounds like you and staff have found that KPK is I may be a little confused, but I think what I heard you say is that they're in compliance with the required financial assurances, but your initial review indicates there may be a need to file a petition for an increase in financial assurance, but you're not conclusive on that point yet. Did I capture what you said correctly?
You have captured that correctly, Chair Robbins. Sorry if there was an echo there.
No problem. So again, I think let's, at least from this commissioner's perspective, we take that under advisement. And we will allow staff to continue its review, continue to work with KPK on that front. And, we would anticipate that we'll see either concurrence between the parties or filing on staff's part, and that would come back to us. And then we would, take that up at the appropriate time. Again, we're at a check-in period today from my perspective.
Chair Robbins, if I might just briefly, just to clarify your synopsis here of the update that we've provided, when we're talking about potential additional financial assurance, this is something that staff would ultimately need guidance from the commissioners. This is not something that at this point we're looking to necessarily engage in just quite yet. So if there is direction from you, we will take that under advisement.
Understood, but you're not looking for that direction from us yet today because we have kind of an inconclusive report, right?
That's correct. I just wanted to at least put that out there.
Okay. Mr. Jacobs, anything from you or your client with regard to this initial early on report on the financial assurance aspect?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, hearing this for the first time, I don't believe this information has been shared with my client, so a little difficult to respond. I do believe that it is potentially inconsistent with the ability to pay aspects of the compliance plan agreement and order finding violation. This commission found that KPK had an inability to pay more than the $795,000 that it is obligated to pay over time under the compliance plan agreement. So reserving future comment on the issue of financial assurance and certainly understanding that staff has the opportunity to review under that provision of the compliance plan agreement, KPK's financial assurance. We're gratified that we're in compliance with current requirements. We're concerned that, additional financial assurance could impair our ability to perform as well as we might under the compliance plan agreement. We'd urge you to keep that in mind until staff revisits this issue. Frankly, staff can advise the commission on this at any time, and we're glad to be within earshot while they're doing it, but this was not anticipated. There's no deadline regarding the financial assurance information. And I would just ask that staff at least apprise us of what they're going to raise to the full commission before they do it, so we're prepared to address it. I think that's common courtesy.
No, and I agree with you, and I think staff is going to be doing that. I think we don't need to litigate this before the commission until you guys have had a chance to sort of sort through the issues. So that's at least my direction to staff, and as chair, I'm sure that they agree with that. Again, I think part of this is, we're sailing a ship that's just been built, and we brought in these deadlines for staff reports to us. But I encourage your clients and staff to work through the issues that are found on the financial assurances front. And before staff comes to us, and I think my fellow commissioners would agree, would want to make sure that there's been every opportunity for the chance to arrive at consensus on these issues. So that's at least my direction. I don't want to steal the floor from fellow commissioners. If anybody else has anything they'd like to suggest, please do so now. Otherwise, we can turn to Mr. Packett. Commissioner McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if folks recall from our whole deliberations, this was a really important piece to me, because I think some of the things we're seeing with this operator are red flags that indicate, this inability to pay, this inability to come into compliance, for me, are red flags. And so if we see compliance and remediation issues outside of just what we've come to agreement in this compliance plan continue to grow, I, as a commissioner, am concerned about this operator's ability to maintain compliance, to be in good standing, and to be able to take care of all the assets that they own. And so perhaps at the next quarterly meeting, there can be an update about how things are progressing and an update from staff about further assessment after they've also had a conversation with KPK. But I would like another check-in about this, because I think this is a really important piece for us to understand what's going on, and that there is adequate financial assurance to cover everything that's going on with this operator. That's one commissioner's opinion. You are on mute, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Nanjapa, then Commissioner Messner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to concur with what Commissioner McGowan just noted, and also just to clarify slightly on what you had said, Mr. Chair, regarding communications between KPK and staff. I mean, I fully and completely agree that that needs to occur to the extent possible before these updates, so that everybody's aware. Although I would say that it does not necessarily have to be achieving consensus, as long as there has been communication of the concerns that have been raised or that need to be addressed, and that can be shared, publicly in these hearings. But the point being that I do completely agree that communication is necessary, but at this point, I don't know that consensus is necessary.
I agree as well. I also instruct my kids when they're having spats that consensus is something that I'd rather see than not. So yeah, Commissioner Messner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to concur with Commissioner McGowan on the need to review the financial assurance or get additional information in the next quarterly update. So, thank you.
All right, we're still on the financial assurance update portion. Anything further from commissioners? All right, well then we would direct staff and KPK to keep at it on those issues and bring a report back to us at the appropriate time. And obviously, staff, you have the opportunity to file something with us if ever need be. Okay, with that, I would call upon Commissioner Hackett. I believe he wanted to provide an update as well.
Thank you, Chair Robbins, and thanks everyone for the discussion so far. I did just want to share an update from CDPHE's perspective. As you're aware, there's a consent decree between the Air Pollution Control Division, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, then the Department of Justice, and KPK. That consent decree became effective in April of 2020. The Air Division, EPA, and Department of Justice continues to work with KPK on compliant implementation of that consent decree. And to date, KPK has submitted three semi-annual reports pursuant to this consent decree, and they'll submit a fourth report in February of 2022. These are the main touch points, along with targeted inspections for monitoring compliance with that consent decree. The compliance obligation under that consent decree are complex and voluminous, and the Air Division, EPA, and Department of Justice are using tools available in the consent decree to push for full compliance with all terms of the decree. So I just wanted to provide that update. And if anyone has any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to take those back to the air divisions. I haven't been very involved in the process, so I'm kind of just relaying this information.
Thanks for the relay, Commissioner Hackett. Any questions from commissioners? Okay, seeing no questions, I believe that concludes the KPK update. I want to kind of summarize where I think we are at this point.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead.
if I may, I apologize. Just a point of order. We did not obviously get a chance to review the order finding violation, which is quite lengthy, until it was issued in final form. And we have noted some inaccuracies and typographical errors in it. Not many, but some, and some significant, and would like to provide a red line and annotation of that for the commission's consideration and its council's consideration, also to staff and its council, for possible correction of those typographical and other inaccuracies in the lengthy order finding violation. Would it be appropriate to do so? We could have that to you this afternoon.
AG Davenport, please appear. God, I love it when I can do that. Thank you, AG Davenport. I assume that there's nothing in the act or otherwise that would preclude us from potentially having a reconsideration of an order that we've entered, but I don't want to presume anything. I'm not a lawyer anymore. What should we do with this request?
Well, I would have to say, to start with, that this is not a request that I think we've dealt with, or at least in my memory, before. I do think correction of typographical errors is something that can be maybe done without a significant additional process. More substantive issues may require additional process. The commission does have in all of its orders, including this one, that it reserves the right to amend an order, but it does state that that's after notice and hearing. So I think based on that, perhaps what I would suggest is that Mr. Jacobs send that red line to me, and I can review and maybe come back to the commission, or have some additional conversations with Mr. Jacobs and staff and see how it is appropriate to proceed there.
I think that's an excellent idea. So why don't we just agree on that? Mr. Jacobs, submit your red lines to Mr. Davenport, as well as Ms. Stafford, and then the three of you discuss it. I agree, if it's typographical, non-substantive, I think it can just be amended without further input. If it does verge into the realm of substance, then AG Davenport, I'm sure we'll be hearing from you. Any other commissioner have a concern with that approach? I'm seeing nodding of heads, so I think we're in a good shape. Does that
Thank you,
cover
Mr.
that
Chairman.
point, Mr. Jacobs?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay. So I think I was trying to sort of summarize next steps. I think next steps are that we are to receive from staff and KPK an update as to the plans in early February. I stand readily available if necessary as hearing officer or whatever, because I also need to approve plans. And then staff is going to continue its review with regard to financial assurance. And if there is concern, the staff and KPK will discuss that amongst themselves. And if those concerns are not resolved, I anticipate the commission will be hearing from staff about that. So that's kind of where I think we are. We do have a May update for compliance with just sort of the general, all the terms of the plan. And finally, Any commissioner that desires to review any of the submitted documents is going to work through Ms. Larson to obtain said documents, and KPK's cool with that, so to speak. Summarize that okay, Ms. Stafford, from your perspective?
Thank you, Chair Robbins. That matches with my notes. Thank you.
Mr. Jacobs?
Yes, that's accurate. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further from commissioners on this docket matter? Great. Go forth and do good work. We hope to hear positive things from you in another month.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, I am turning back to our agenda. We have a break scheduled, but we're not even at that time, so I think we can keep forward. With that, the next matter is a matter involving Great Western Operating, docket number 1909-00569. The information indicates the commission will consider the land rights exception to the hearing officer's recommended order granting Great Western Operating Company's motion to dismiss. With that, would like to call upon AAG Davenport to sort of set the stage for us, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, overall, what this is it's a pooling application matter. The pooling application was filed by Great Western. My intent is to set up kind of procedurally where the commission is and the standard by which it reviews this matter. I'm not intending to provide any opinion as to the substantive legal issues right now, unless if you choose to hear from the parties and after you hear from them, you have legal questions to me. This application was approved by the commission on consent agenda on November 17th, 2021. It was on the consent agenda because the protesting party, the Lambrights, had their protests dismissed when the hearing officer granted a motion to dismiss that protest by Great Western. It is before you because the Lambrights filed an exception to the hearing officer's dismissal, as is their right under the commission rule 520. So it is still properly before you, even though the commission did vote to approve it on consent in November of last year. The standard for review is based on the record before the hearing officer. So the commission reviews what was before the hearing officer's conclusion and order, and the arguments of the parties as to whether or not the hearing officer erred. This standard also is that the commission reviews the legal conclusions of the hearing officer on a de novo basis. That's a legal term, meaning that you are not required to defer to any of the hearing officer's legal conclusions. You review them as if you're looking at them for the first time and don't have to give the hearing officer any deference on legal conclusions. Procedurally, if the commission upholds or affirms the hearing officer's order for dismissal, that will conclude this matter before the commission. There will be no further proceedings. On the other hand, if the commission reverses the hearing officer's orders to dismiss, this matter will be returned to the hearing officer for further proceedings with the Lambrights as a party, as a protestant.
Thank you, AAG Davenport. And I believe that this is before us without the need for additional argument. We've got all the pleadings before us at this point in time. And I believe we can just move forward to deliberation. Is that?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Yes, that's accurate. I'd note for the commission's review that the appropriate rule, as I said, is Rule 520, which does address exceptions. Rule 520C, as in cat, subpart 2, provides that the commission may order oral argument regarding exceptions, but does not require the opportunity for oral argument. It also further provides the commission may terminate argument whenever in its judgment further argument is unnecessary. So I do believe it's in your discretion to choose not to have oral argument. I will also note that there are two pleadings before you on the exception. The first is the land rights exception itself, and then there's Great Western's response to that in writing. The fact that you, sorry, Mr. Chair.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
The fact that you may not request affirmative oral argument from the parties does not preclude you from asking questions of the parties if you have any questions.
Okay, very good. At this point, I would look to my fellow commissioners. I believe we're first and foremost, does any commissioner feel a need for either oral argument or questions of either side? And I will preface that with my position that I don't feel a need for either, but that does not mean I'm alone in that bucket. Okay, seeing that, then I think we just move into deliberation. Does anyone want to initiate thoughts on the matter that's before us? Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'll kick it off with just some of my thoughts. And, reading through the pleadings and looking at what the land rights have asserted, I guess, as their claims that were under review by Hearing Officer Thomas. I tend to agree with kind of all the points that, as he kind of broke them out in his order, that his order was appropriate and the findings therein were appropriate. And I'll pull this up on my screen and kind of go through kind of the four that were identified on the petition from the land rights. The first, that the operator failed to offer an unleased mineral owner in the application lands a reasonable offer to lease. Based on what I understand in the record here, is that the land rights were in fact leased. For the assertion or the claim that the pooling application will result in waste or the drilling of unnecessary wells, etc. Pooling does not result in the drilling of wells. Pooling is an administrative action to essentially assert the proper and equitable payments based on the leases that are within that pooled unit. As to the claim that the leases that affected the land rights interests are not on the same level as other current lease offers, excuse me. It's not our position as a commission to negotiate, to renegotiate, or to insert ourselves into private contracts that are leases. It's my understanding these leases were legacy leases and were taken when the land rights purchased their property, and the land rights were successors to those leases, and were on notice when they made those purchases that their property rights were bound to those terms. As to number D, or letter D, that the leases that affect the land rights interests also require that current laws be applied. I think the current laws are being applied here. I think that our rules are being applied appropriately. And so, kind of sum up what I've read through in the petition from the land rights and the order itself and the record, my conclusion is that I think that Hearing Officer Thomas was correct in his order, and I'm prepared to vote in affirmation of that order.
Thank you for that summary, Commissioner Gonzalez. Others with thoughts? Commissioner Messner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having read both parties' pleadings and having reviewed the record before the hearing officer, seeing no issue with the hearing officer's legal descriptions and concurring with Commissioner Gonzalez's conclusions, I make a motion to uphold the hearing officer's decision in this situation, this instance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to uphold the hearing officer decision. Is there further discussion? Commissioner Nanjapa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just again, more just commentary. I support the reasons that the hearing officer put forward in the motions, as well as what Commissioners Gonzalez and Messner have noted. I just will note for those listening that in the event that this was a new lease offer and there were terms that were of concern, that's something that we could potentially discuss. But I do hope that the land rights look at their other legal options with their concerns that they may have with their lease terms. That said, again, concurring with what Commissioner Gonzalez laid out, at this point, the land rights were previously leased. It was a legacy lease. And unfortunately, there's not much we can say about the lease terms when the lease is already in place. And so with that, all of that in mind, I also support the motion to, I can't remember the specific language that you just used, Commissioner Messner, but to uphold the motion by Hearing Officer Thomas.
Very good. Further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Does that conclude this matter then, AG Davenport?
It does, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. We have nothing further on our agenda. Is there anything further from any commissioners or anyone else? Great. Commissioners, starting Friday, we're going to get a whole lot of reading material on financial assurances, so buckle up. And to our stakeholders, we look forward to getting that reading material. Thank you for participating with us. We've got a very busy few weeks ahead of us with financial assurances, as well as OGDPs that are moving forward. So 2022 is going to come at us quick. With that, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Great. See you in a bit. Stay warm.